When you think about living more compassionately, your attention gets drawn to all the suffering in the world, and that can feel quite overwhelming. Hi, my name is Dr. Stan Steindl, and I thought I'd speak to you briefly today about compassion motivation, compassion for others, and how this can sometimes lead to quite overwhelming feelings. And we might try also to explore 10 tips, 10 things that you can do to maybe get started. As you know, compassion is a sensitivity to suffering in self and others with a commitment to try to alleviate and prevent it. And in this way, compassion is quite different to kindness. Acts of kindness, or imagining acting more kindly towards others, can actually be quite energizing and even uplifting. Compassion involves getting into contact with suffering, and so in this way it can sometimes feel quite different. Of course, compassion can have a twofold benefit. It benefits the person that we're being compassionate towards, hopefully, by helping them to alleviate just perhaps a little bit their suffering. But compassion towards others can also be of benefit for us. It can offer us meaning and satisfaction, and actually can sometimes even be quite joyful. It's just that sometimes when we start to think about all the suffering in the world, we quickly realize that we actually just can't help everybody. In fact, sometimes we realize that we can barely scratch the surface, and this can actually be quite demotivating. The distress that we feel when faced with the enormity of the suffering in the world can actually motivate us to turn away from that suffering. Sometimes we prefer to avoid or ignore all of that suffering and instead just prefer to do nothing. We can experience what is sometimes referred to as a collapse of compassion. So, we know that compassion can be beneficial for others. It can help to alleviate their suffering. We also know that compassion is good for us. It feels good and meaningful and satisfying and even just very important and enjoyable for us to be compassionate towards others. We know that sometimes, however, that all of the suffering in the world and recognizing of all of that suffering can cause us to have a collapse of compassion. It feels too much and overwhelming. So here are 10 tips for getting started with living more compassionately and managing just that potential for the collapse of compassion. 1. Set an intention. Wake up in the morning and set an intention for living more compassionately that day. Setting a compassionate motivation intention. Perhaps saying to yourself something like, may I notice the suffering around me and may I try to be helpful. 2. Start locally. It can really be important to just start locally. While there are many worthy causes all around the world, and you may very well find opportunities to be compassionate further afield, it can be really great to start locally and to experience that immediacy of action and outcome in your local community. 3. Start small. It can be perfectly reasonable to start with small acts of compassion. There are many opportunities day to day where you might be able to find little ways to begin acting compassionately. Try listening a little longer to someone who perhaps is upset, or running an errand for someone who you know is really starting to run out of time. 4. Look for opportunities. One of the important components of compassion is engagement, that ability to notice and then engage with suffering. And so we can walk through life with our head up, metaphorically and literally, noticing opportunities to be more compassionate. 5. Be practical. The second component of compassion is related to action. So try to be practical with being more compassionate in your day-to-day life. Seeing suffering and then doing something practical to help can really make a difference. 6, focus your efforts. When you are starting small and starting local, it can be also really useful to consider how to focus your efforts. Perhaps something has happened in your own life and you would like to try to help people who are going through the same thing. Or perhaps your community is struggling with a particular challenge. Focusing your efforts can help you maintain energy and motivation. 7, play to your strengths. Acting with compassion skillfully is most vital and most likely to be helpful. So what are your skills and what might you be able to do to use them? Are you an artist, a carpenter, an accountant? No matter what you do, you have certain skills that can also be brought to living more compassionately. 8, inspire others. Compassion is infectious and can spread through a family or friendship group, a community, and beyond. Setting a compassionate example can inspire others, and this is certainly something where the more the merrier. 9, do a compassion audit. By this, I mean just check in with yourself at the end of the day and ask yourself, how well have I lived compassionately today? Where are some of the moments where I've been helpful? Where are some of the moments where I've been unhelpful or even harmful? We are all fallible human beings, and so sometimes we can accidentally or carelessly or even on purpose harm another. In fact, sometimes by doing so we can cause another suffering. Being aware of this, understanding it, and working to do things differently can be a really important part of growth and flourishing. 10, don't forget yourself. A famous Buddhist psychologist, Jack Kornfield, once said, "If your compassion does not include yourself, then it is incomplete." But I might leave self-compassion for a future video. Compassion means turning our attention to suffering, which can be overwhelming when you start to consider all the suffering in the world. Set an intention, start locally, start small. Look for opportunities, be practical, focus your efforts. Play to your strengths and inspire others. Do regular compassion audits, and don't forget yourself. So thank you for watching this video, and by all means put any comments below. Really would love to hear from you. And all the very best as you continue on your compassionate journey.